Riding is hard, but war wagons have a few characteristics that make it a tiny bit easier. Well, certainly their newfound speed in Immortal Empires helps quite a bit, and the fact they have quite a bit of ammunition also is pretty decent, but overall, kiting is still a fairly difficult tactic to pull off effectively for a number of reasons, the biggest of which you have to have movement and target priority all at the same time, countercharging, there's just a lot of moving parts. Granted, you're up against a player who's good at kiting, then being in the opposite position can be almost as equally challenging. Today we've got game 4 between Raziel and Spartan here. Spartan coming in hot with an all-mobility Empire build, which I absolutely love. Boris the Todd, and we've got some more wagons here, a couple of Pistoliers as well. Already skirmishing, plenty of Empire Knights and Reichsguard mixed. And that's it. Deathcaster also up in the air to essentially act as another kite tool. Already Spirit Leeching Valkia with 3 Minotaurs. Great weapons, it looks like, on all of them. So lots of anti-large AP cut through those Knights. Some Marauders for an initial screen. We've got plenty of mobility as well in Fleshhounds, 4 Fleshhounds. Yep, with Chaos Warhound, and then an extra Blood Crusher as well. So be interesting to see here how things develop, and I'm reminded immediately of a game where I had to play against Claxton Soothsayer, at the time one of the best land battle players in the world, and incredibly difficult. I had to play vampire counts into his empire and faced a similar situation where I was getting truly kited with a full mobility build, and it can be very difficult. The thing to do as much as possible, it can be quite tricky, is to try and take the damage on these Marauders. They've got shields, they're the cheapest unit here, they've got lots of HP to just absorb the shots of the war wagons, and then eventually in the end game your expensive mobile units will be able to actually win the fight. Here, I will say, coming from painful personal experience, the forward pressure from the mobility seems nice on paper, but the heavy Knights of the Empire will crush the Hounds without support, and although support is imminently incoming, sacrifice of a few Empire Knights to get rid of some of Khorne's mobility here is certainly well worth it in the grand scheme of things, as many of the Empire Knights and Reichsguard are going to be able to get away anyway. Certainly some will take some damage, but it again baits out the more high-value Minotaurs, who then come rushing out in front of these Marauders, right? So it can be tricky, right? You don't want to just continuously take charges, especially in the face. Like the Marauders are definitely vulnerable to that, so you want to keep the Minotaurs in a position to support them. But at the same time, you don't want to be caught in a position necessarily like this, where it's all the high-value, more high-value targets forward. I mean, Fleshhounds certainly are more mid-tier, but tactically here they are high-value because they're some of the only mobile units that you have, right? The entire line of Marauders is somewhat immobile, and right now they're being more or less left in the dust as the war wagons and the Knights continue to pull away. Boris also is in prime position to drop a quick terror charge on any units which are susceptible to it. Meanwhile, Valkia is being continuously Spirit Leeched, and here looks like the Khorne units have a decent opportunity to maybe catch up some of the war wagons, but they do have enough mass to get through for the most part. A couple of wagons will get hung up here and take significant damage, as will some Knights and Reichsguard. Again, it's all worth it as long as the attrition is playing in the Empire's favor in the long term. I'm not sure. Sometimes it can be hard to tell, and right now we've got a big pitched fight developing as the Knights are forced to kind of countercharge in here to stop up these Khorne units. Finally, the Marauders are almost able to catch up to combat, but just as they do so, the Knights, war wagons are able to mostly extricate themselves, again, taking losses all the time, certainly, but also inflicting losses on the mobility. And this is really the part of the army for Khorne that matters the most. It's where a lot of the killing power is. Certainly the Marauders by themselves are not going to be able to deal with the likes of Boris and these heavy Knights. Boris especially is a decent enough combatant that he can pretty much cycle charge all the Khorne Marauders to death in the late game, I would imagine. So it's up to the rest of the army not to die and try and take that damage on the Marauders. But I'll stop harping on that point for the time being. We'll just continue to appreciate that anytime Valkia comes in range, Spartan's been doing a good job of focusing her down. We'll fast forward this a little bit, as this game is going to take some time, and that's another thing too about kiting, is both players, if it's being properly executed, both players are in a position where they can't really make mistakes. I mean, certainly if it's not being properly executed, then the kiting player will just get caught, especially if it's against a good player who faced this sort of thing before. Here, certainly the Empire is getting quite a few of their units caught, and the Knights are just about completely gone at this point. I mean, the Reichsguard and the Empire Knights have paid a very heavy toll for this development, and the Khorne mobile forces are still active, which is definitely a problem. So now it turns into a true kite where, absolutely true kite where, I mean, Spartan really just wants to avoid a melee engagement as much as possible. Might try and get some of these rallied knights in here to kind of pick away at the flanks, manages to shatter that Warhound. Great little get there. And then even just running these guys in as a distraction will allow the war wagons and pistoliers to get a few more shots in. Another thing about the war wagons, though, is notice as I get this close in angle, the war wagons can actually fire over the heads of their pistolier brethren. And, I mean, I think because of the way the model phasing works, they can... I don't know if they can still do that through other units. It was a thing at one point in time. But at the very least, that high firing angle allows them to fire over other friendly troops in many situations. They can fire in melee. They're pretty much just always going to be shooting no matter what. So even as this unit gets caught up and horribly damaged, eventually routed off, and almost that entire time they're going to be shooting, right? Except for when they're routed, obviously. There you go. Empire trying to avoid the trees as much as possible here, but things are looking a little bit dicey. Some of the knights have rallied to the cause. We've got one like 50% health unit of Empire Knights here. Quite a bit of ammunition left on the pistoliers and the war wagons. The pistoliers in particular can run out of ammo pretty fast, so Spartan's been doing a good job of conserving that ammunition. He's not been conserving his Winds of Magic, just dumping it all into Spirit Leeching Valkia, which is certainly the right call. Valkia could try and respond here and try and hunt down the Amethyst Wizard, but whenever she's gotten close, you've probably seen to this War Wagon box. The War Wagons just open fire on her directly. Here we see one Minotaur committed again without support, so tail of the tape. Need those Marauders more than you think you do. Boris with a quick hit and run charge there, risking it heavily as the Flesh Hounds and Blood Crushers get a charge animation. They're going to perhaps pin him to the ground here so that the Minotaurs can now come get us around in. Let's see if they get an attack order. No, it looks like they still have an attack order on those Reichsguard trying to pursue them. And Boris is actually attacking them in the back, it looks like, a little bit there. It actually did play an animation and finally able to get back up in the air. This whole time, too, that the, again, the Flesh Hounds and the Blood Crushers have this attack order on these Empire Knights galloping across the ice here. They're being shot in the side by those war wagons, just accruing great value, especially on the Blood Crushers there. Boris swoops in once again for a quick charge, trying to break the leadership of these demonic units, and he does. Also, if he has the debuffs, significantly lower their stats. Like, he did not actually bring the debuffs, which is interesting. That's just the leadership debuff. Only makes sense. Trying to cost optimize this as much as possible. Maybe it's worth it. Try and find the extra funds to bring Crush the Weak and White Cloak of Ulrich. Hard to say. I think the White Cloak of Ulrich might have a speed debuff that would be mildly useful in a situation like this. It does also showcase Khorne's lack of tools for dealing something like this. They have no slows whatsoever, I don't think. Can't think of any off the top of my head. They have very few debuffs as well. I mean, realistically, they don't really have a lot of control tools at all to be able to control the battlefield. Their whole MO is just to rush in, right, and try and win in melee. So, Empire taking this tactic is smart in a sense, but it's also incredibly difficult to execute well. And so far, we have seen that the players have been trading on a razor's edge, more or less. The Empire is slightly behind on the balance of power for the time being. Starting to run low on ammunition, but if they can just finish off these Minotaurs, that will be pretty much game over as Valkia faces her last Spirit Leech over on the far side here. Say last Spirit Leech. Is it actually going to be enough to finish her off? Not quite, but check back with her in just a moment. Meanwhile, back at the actual battle, once again, going through this little wood. So let's fast forward some more as this late game develops. War Wagons of the Pistoliers using up the last of their ammunition. Some of them knights starting to shatter. I mean, a lot of them are already shattered. They're not starting to shatter, but you get the gist of it. Minotaurs, again, too far forward in this formation, face the brunt of that gunfire. And they're get overextended a little bit. One unit gets routed off. Nice chasing with the Amethyst Wizard and then following up with the Knights there. Finally, with these units just about out of ammunition, we're going to see some cycle charging. And you know when you're charging in with melee war wagons, you're in a desperate situation. But the balance of power actually showing heavily in the Empire's favor now, as it's really just one 3/4 health Minotaur unit that's holding this all together for Khorne. And there's still some Spirit Leeches left, still a little bit of ammunition left from the Pistoliers, been very well conserved throughout the course of the battle, so you continue to build the attacking rule by utilizing that missile weapon, while also cycle charging with Boris. And you see a quick tear route there from Boris, and that's going to be the fate of all of these Marauders as the battle drags on. Eventually, Raziel's going to throw in the towel there, as he was pretty much caught out. Minotaur's time was numbered and would have finished things off, so it's a proper kite victory, and not something you see every day for sure. It can definitely be tough, especially at higher levels of play, to do and do effectively, but credit to Spartan here for pulling it off with the Empire, no less. Like I said, War Wagons offer a few unique advantages that allow them to help out in this type of a situation, and certainly some factions are much more vulnerable to this than others. Faction can countershoot you much, if at all. It's much tougher to kite them. But anyway, yeah, Boris definitely contributes, too much in terms of raw value, but same thing with these knights, but tactically did enough, and then a lot of the actual damage comes on the wagons. Pistoliers also, both close to pay for themselves. I mean, tactically, again, sticking around to the late game, and probably would have paid for themselves on that final Minotaur had the game actually gone to a full conclusion there. Minotaurs did struggle. One of them got close to paying for itself. The Fleshhounds also, I mean, again, they get the value they need to. It's just the Marauders did close to nothing in this particular battle, and I think Raziel had maybe kept expensive units back behind and just try to play off that infantry as much as possible. Maybe you make a huge crescent, and again, you keep your mobile units close enough to support, but also in such a position where you can screen out some of those missiles and maybe not take the brunt of it on your more expensive mobile units. But anyway, let's go ahead and get to a Game 5, as it was a rather quick affair. Finally, in Game 5, Spartan's Rat Horde, led by Ikit Claw, faced off in the open plains of MP Crossroads against Raziel's staunch Kislev. Kislev's superior range and firepower enabled them to efficiently focus fire on the Poison Wind Globadiers, draw the Skaven out of their defensive position, and ultimately cut them down, giving Raziel the win on the series. That's it for me for today. Hope that you guys enjoyed. If you do like this sort of content, be sure to like, subscribe, hit that bell notification. Every time I upload a new video, you'll be notified. Thanks again. We'll see you next time.